Thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you for coming. How many people speak English pretty well? Does anybody? Okay. I will say just a few words in English to give Marek a chance to get upstairs. I thought when I was coming here that this would be a reading, just reading the text. But he said, well, this is more of a performance. So could you do American stand-up comedy? And because he knows that I'm an actor too. And I said, no, of course I couldn't do stand-up comedy. But what I could do is tell stories. So that's what I will do today, is tell some stories. And since this is a literary festival, I thought I would tell some stories about writers. And so this... Oh, then he also suggested, couldn't we do some more audio-visual things, make it a little bit more dramatic? So we have some little touches that you will see to try to make it a little bit more interesting for you. So this is my version of American stand-up comedy, which is not very much like American stand-up comedy. Anyway, for some reason, people seem to want to know who writers really are. Now, in America, this isn't really so true anymore, but maybe it's a little true. And in Europe, it may be a little bit more true. But the only good piece of advice I ever heard about who writers really are came from the American writer Paul Theroux, who said that writers tend to be shorter than you think they are. Now, non-writers are not the only people who want to know who writers really are. Writers themselves often pursue writers, especially if they're young, because they want to, perhaps because they want some of the magic to rub off on them. And even writers themselves pursue writers. They get caught up in a kind of chasing their own myth, and they tend to think of themselves as taller than they really are. So these are a couple of stories that I'm going to tell you about writers pursuing writers. And I can warn you right now that these stories aren't totally true. They're partly true, partly not true. But so you're not going to find out who writers really are, except as much as fiction can tell you, which is probably the best way to find out who writers really are anyway. Now, the first story takes place in the winter of 1962, 1963, and I'm 21 years old, and I'm sort of bumming around Europe with a good friend of mine, another American named Maurice Weddington, who's a black composer from Chicago, very handsome and funny guy. And we're in Rome. And we've come to Rome because we want a taste of La Dolce Vita. And La Dolce Vita was a movie that had just come out a few years before, and it had created a whole myth about Rome. And that was the myth that we were pursuing. And we'll see if we can get some La Dolce Vita now. This was the Via Veneto. So beautiful people and activity and cafes all over Via Veneto. That's what we hope to meet. It was a total myth. Rome was dead, was empty. No cafes were open. And in fact, Maurice and I went to see Dr. Strangelove 4 times. And we sat through the newsreel 4 times because we didn't know what else to do, and also because it was so cold in our rooms, because it was December that and they didn't have heat in our rooms. So that was Rome for us, not La Dolce Vita. Anyway, so now it's New Year's Eve, about 11 o'clock at night, and he and I go out on the street. We're living in the Pensione Marguta on Via Marguta, which is right next to the Spanish Steps, right in the center of Rome. And we go out into the street looking for some kind of fun on New Year's Eve. But Rome is totally empty. There are no cars on the street. All the shutters are shut. Everything is black and strange and spooky. And we should have known that something was not exactly right. But at midnight, all the shutters on the buildings opened. People started throwing out furniture and books and bottles, and this is true, everything, pouring out, and the light is pouring out, and we run for cover because everything is crashing down on us. We get in a doorway to hide. After about 15 minutes, it stops. But it's as if we have been in a blitz, because the custom in Rome is to literally throw out the old and let in the new on New Year's Eve. So it was terrifying. We can get some of my experience now. Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it was something like that. Anyway, so after the attack, after the New Year's Eve at midnight, we met some Dutch students. We went to their rooms and we started partying. And so we woke up on New Year's Day about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we're both hungover, and Maurice is wearing his underwear and a beret. He's a big, tall guy. And he decides to continue the New Year's tradition. So he takes a bottle, and he goes to the window, and he flips it out like this, an empty bottle. And there's a sickening crash. And I run in my underwear to the window, and I see that it has shattered the windshield of a Maserati, because what happened is that they moved the cars back after New Year's Eve. They moved the cars back for New Year's Day. Downstairs, there's a crowd forming, and they're looking up at the window to try to find out from which window this bottle came. So I say, hurry up, get dressed, let's get out of here, let's get out. So we throw on our clothes, a few clothes, and we run downstairs, and we join the crowd. We say, where did it come from, where did it come from? And the police are there too, of course. So everybody's, look, because this doesn't happen, I guess. So we join the crowd, looking up at the window, until things calm down a little bit. And then we go to a cafe that's right across the street, just to keep an eye on things. And after about some minutes, an hour maybe, an Italian guy comes into the cafe, and he goes up to us, he sees us, and he says, "You're American." And we say, "Yeah, we're American." And he's about 40, he's tough looking, he's balding, he looks like one of the characters in The Sopranos. Do you know that TV? There's a TV series of mafia guys. He looks like a mafia gangster. And he says to us, he starts bragging about a lot of things. And he says that he was a pilot during the war, and he shot down 12 American planes, which was not a very good thing to tell Americans. But so we're a little bit nervous about him. And he brags about a lot of things. He also tells us that he is Dylan Thomas's wife's lover. Which is, anyway, and Dylan Thomas has been dead for a few years by now, so it's possible that he is her lover, but it doesn't seem very likely. So we're there, and he's buying us some drinks, and who should come into the cafe? This woman, sort of 45 or so, who's quite pregnant, and she has 2 teenage children, and the girl, unfortunately, is the spitting image of Dylan Thomas. The boy looks like her, and she's quite a beautiful woman, very fine features and very self-confident. And so we're pretty sure that it has to be Caitlin Thomas, as that was her name. She was quite famous. Now, I had been to university with her oldest son. I didn't know him, but I knew that he was there, so we had something to talk about. And she was very interested in these 2 American guys who were traveling around Europe, and she ignores Giuseppe, the Italian guy who was supposed to be her lover, totally ignores him, and she invites us to lunch. Says, come and visit, come to our place and for lunch one day. And she lives on the outskirts of Rome, and she writes her telephone number down and gives it to us. So we're excited about it. The kids are curious about us, especially the 12-year-old boy whose name is Colm. A week passes. Rome continues to be dead. But we do meet one other famous writer. There's an American writer named Catherine Ann Porter, who was quite famous in the time. And she was in Rome because one of her books, Ship of Fools, was being translated. I won't go into how I met her, but she also invited us for a drink because everybody in Rome that time seemed to be lonely. So that Saturday, we decide we will have a literary day. So we first decide we'll call up Catherine Ann Porter. And about 11 o'clock in the morning, we call her. She answers. She's very angry because we have gotten her out of her shower. And this is not something you do. She's a kind of aristocratic Southern woman, actually from Texas. And she is very offended by the fact we've gotten her out of her shower. So she hangs up on us. But it doesn't stop us because we're young, we're arrogant, we're American. Americans can do anything in 1963. So we call up Caitlin Thomas. And she says, "Oh, what took you so long? Come out and have lunch with us." And we say, "Now?" And she said, yes, come right on the bus," and gives us instructions to go out. Now, we get on the bus to a suburb of Rome. And I don't know if you remember La Dolce Vita, but there was a lot of building going on around Rome, and it's in the movie. You see some of those half-finished houses, and they're probably not so different from what they were building in the Soviet bloc countries, too. Not very attractive houses at all. And they live in a kind of small development, horseshoe-shaped. The houses are maybe 3 stories high, and there are new trees and new plantings. It's not a bad-looking place. So we walk up the stairs, and Colm, the boy, lets us in, and there is a table set with food, with a whole lunch, with a fish, with potato salad, with salad, and so on, and a lot of liquor, but not wine, scotch, because these people drink scotch for lunch, which is not so common in Italy. Anyway, at that point, I'm not a very good drinker, but my friend Maurice is. And Giuseppe, who's used to drinking wine, not hard liquor, is not a very good drinker, but Caitlin definitely is. She's Irish, Irish-English. So we sit down for lunch. And we talk about Dylan Thomas, we talk about London, we talk about New York, we talk about writing, we talk about music. This is a very literary afternoon, very jolly, and we're quite excited about it. And because we're thinking, this is what we came for. This is what we came to Europe, to live the artist's life. But as time goes on, and we all are drinking more, Caitlin starts to pick on Giuseppe, her lover. And she starts to make little nasty remarks about him. She says he doesn't know anything about art, he doesn't know English, why is she wasting her life with him? And he's a pretty angry guy to begin with, but now he is kind of getting more and more furious, and more, you can see him getting angrier and angrier. One of the problems is that he thinks that Caitlin is flirting with Maurice, which she is, really. And Maurice is flirting with Caitlin, which he is. But both of them are big flirts, so it's not a big problem, but to him it is. And he wants to get rid of us. So around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they decide to take us home. We're all drunk. We've been drinking the whole afternoon. And the whole family goes in downstairs with us because Giuseppe is going to drive us home back to Rome. And they show us around the apartment complex a little bit. And then Colm says, I want to show them the swimming pool, the piscina. And Giuseppe does not like this at all, not at all. But Caitlin ignores him and says, yes, of course, take them down to the piscina. So we all walk down, just Maurice and I and Colm walk down to the piscina, and then we come back. And when we come back, Colm is standing near Giuseppe, and Giuseppe takes a swing at him like that, with his open hand, but a serious slap at him. And Caitlin says, Jesus Christ, Giuseppe, it's just a fucking piscina. It was a great line. But what happens is they all start walking upstairs, and they forget about us completely. So we don't really know what to do. We're drunk. We don't know how to get home. They're not driving us anymore. So we stand there for a while, and then we say, well, maybe, then we hear noise. There's crashing and bashing up in the apartment. And we have no idea what's going on. So we decide, well, should we go upstairs or not? We finally decide to walk up the stairs. When we get upstairs on the 3rd floor, the door is open, but nobody has turned on the lights. And as we go in, we see that the place is destroyed, that they have been throwing around the furniture. They have been, the pictures are off. Everything is turned over. And Giuseppe, who's standing right here, he picks up this stone bust about this big, and he's screaming at this boy, and he throws it at this kid. And it breaks maybe a meter away from his head. And he keeps cursing at him. And I am drunk and stupid. And so I say to Giuseppe, shut the fuck up. And he turns to me and he's smiling because this is just what he's been waiting for, really. So he takes a swing at me. And I go down, and I'm not unconscious, but I go down on the floor, and I'm in shock. And then I hear I hear Maurice, or I feel him. He jumps over me and jumps on Giuseppe. And the two of them start wrestling throughout the apartment and really knocking things over, crash, bang, everything going all over the place. And finally they hit the dining room table. The legs go out of the table. They fall splat on the table with the fish, with the booze, with everything dripping, the fish juice and the liquor. And Maurice is on top of Giuseppe. And I'm looking down at them. And the kids have been cowering behind Caitlin. They've been in a corner sort of like this. So Giuseppe says, who's under Maurice, says, let me up. And Maurice says, only if you promise not to take a swing at me. So he asks Caitlin, and Caitlin says, asks Giuseppe, and Giuseppe says, okay, I won't swing at him. And then we look at Caitlin, and she's like this, and she says, oh, we do this every week. So Maurice gets up, and I get up too, and we leave. But this time, nobody is coming to drive us home. They're talking with each other, and we walk down the stairs, and we sit down. It's twilight. It's a kind of balmy weather, and we sit on the steps. And to tell you the truth, we're elated because we think this is just so exciting. This is the life. This is the life, to be an artist, to be with Dylan Thomas's wives, and so on. Now, it just so happened that I had a tape recorder with me because I was going to do an interview with her. I thought I would do an interview about Dylan Thomas. So I actually have the tape of part of that fight, which I'll play for you. See if you can hear. From 1962. We're walking upstairs. Can you hear? That's me.
What did you say?
That's me. They're on.
I'll let him up. Tell him not to take a swing at me.
You hear him, Giuseppe?
Cool, man.
He won't, I promise.
Just tell him to get out. Huh? Get out.
It's okay, Maurice. He won't do anything.
You gonna be okay?
Oh, sure. This happens every week.
Man, Georgie, sure know how to get us in trouble. You okay? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. If I just wanted you to have a good time. Well, I did, baby. Now how the fuck do we get home?
So that's what Maurice says at the end. Now, how the fuck do we get home? So we're there, sitting on this stoop, trying to get home. And we decide to we go to the highway, and we start walking west because it's the warmest way to walk. The sun is coming at us, and we don't know how to get home. After we walk about 500 meters, a little red Fiat going about 100 miles an hour screeches up next to us. It's Giuseppe. And he says, get in. He throws the door open, get in. And we look at each other and say, we don't know if it's a good idea, but we get in. So we drive to Rome. It takes us about a minute and a half to get to Rome. He's driving like this with the wheel sort of in his stomach. And we get to Pensione Marguta. He reaches over Maurice, who's in the front, throws the door open, get out. So we get out. He starts driving back to Rome. And we run upstairs, and we call Caitlin and see if everything is okay. And she says, oh, yes, everything is okay. You should see us when we really have a fight. This is a tough lady. So anyway, there's another week goes by. And during this week, I find that my memories of this afternoon I'm enjoying them less and less, because what I'm remembering is the kids. I'm remembering this look of terror. And I'm also remembering Caitlin's look. She has a kind of excited look in her eye. She's really enjoying it, which is understandable, except she really created the whole thing. And so Maurice and I, he's composing his music, I'm writing, we're sitting at our desks, and we don't talk about it much. But I think we're absorbing that afternoon. Next Saturday, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we decide to go out and have a coffee at the same cafe. We walk in, this is true, we walk in, who should be there? Caitlin, the two kids, Giuseppe, and another man, an Englishman, with horn-rimmed glasses and a tweed jacket, and they invite us. Caitlin greets us like a long-lost, the prodigal son, and Maurice and Giuseppe are kind of, playing, shake hands, kind of feeling each other out. But Giuseppe is not angry anymore in the same way. He's the way he was before, sort of cocky and showing off. So they invite us to sit down, and it starts over again. This time with wine, and the Englishman turns out to be Dylan Thomas's editor. And he seems to be interested in Caitlin. And Caitlin is saying, oh, here are these very interesting young American boys traveling all around Europe. So he's very polite to us. And we're talking again about literature. We're talking about Dylan Thomas. We're having another jolly afternoon. But there are people who are left out, the same people. Aaron, Colm, and Giuseppe. And the kids look really miserable, really miserable. The girl is 19 years old, and she should be sort of flirting with us, but she looks much younger, and she's really clinging to Caitlin. The boy is 12, and he has this kind of eager, feverish look in his eye, an unhealthy look. And Caitlin starts picking on Giuseppe once again, and saying the same things. And Giuseppe starts getting more and more angry. And the kids kind of look smaller and smaller and shrunken. So at some point, Maurice and I look at each other across the table. And we send a signal to each other. So we get up at the same time, we thank them for the drinks, and she says, oh, why are you leaving so soon? We're just getting started. And we kind of nod to each other, and we wave to the kids, and we turn our backs to them, and we never see any of them again. So that's the first story. About the writer's, I guess the writer's life isn't what it's cracked up to be. The second story takes place about 20 years later, in 1980. And I'm in Helsinki, Finland, with a wife and two kids, small kids. I have a Fulbright grant, and I'm studying and translating a Finland-Swedish writer named Henrik Tikkanen. So I'm a writer, but I'm not exactly doing the kind of writing that I want to do. We live in a building with lots of other scholarship holders, even some from Soviet bloc countries like Czechoslovakia. And it's, of course, as you can imagine, it's cold. It's very, very cold there. And I remember one time I was standing in this common room that we had together and looking out the window, and I was standing with people from Cuba and from Ukraine and from Bulgaria, kind of southern countries, and we could actually see the cold coming at us like a kind of ice cloud. Anyway, this story takes place at the beginning of March. One evening, I'm sitting in the sauna. Now, every Finnish building has a sauna. Every apartment building has a sauna, and everybody uses that sauna 2 or 3 times a week because you really need it. The cold gets into your bones, even in the middle of March. And I'm sitting with a bunch of men, the other people in the building, and once they figure out that I'm American, they're aware of, they get a little nervous because this is the time of AIDS, but AIDS doesn't even have a name at this point. And there's one man sitting over to my right who is short and he is bald. He's kind of Slavic looking with Tartar eyes, very clever looking, kind of partly peasant looking, partly clever man in his 60s. And he moves when he finds out I'm American, he moves his towel a few inches away. And he says, in German, he says, do you have the American disease? Because that's how it was known then. And I said in bad German, Nein, ich bin verheiratet. I'm married, which didn't make any sense at all. Anyway, this was the first time I meet this guy. Now, he's Czech, I learned, or Czechoslovakian. He's a writer. He's very famous in his country, but I've never heard of him. A few days later, I was invited to a kind of party in the afternoon of drinking and eating a little bit from the other people in the Soviet bloc. And I can see that this fellow is very respected and they take him very seriously, but I don't understand a word he's saying because he's speaking Czech, he's speaking Russian, he's speaking German, and I can't follow what's going on, except that I hear these names like Allen Ginsberg and Jackson Pollock and Jack Kerouac, these American artists and it's surprising to me, but he's not really talking to me. The other people in the group don't seem to know who he's talking about. I do, of course, but he's not really including me. So at first, we didn't have much contact, but after a while, our relationship kind of warmed up. Now, the first way that it warmed up was through my kids. I have 2 kids. At that point, my daughter Lily is 9, and my son, whose nickname is Booty, is 3 years old. Even though we're in a house for scholarship holders, they act as if it's their house completely. So they run up and down the stairs. They spread all their toys in the common room. They talk to everybody. And this Czech guy seems to have a particular interest in them. And I see him reading a Finnish magazine or pretending to read a Finnish magazine and eating an apple or an orange and kind of looking off through to the side. And at times, he likes especially my son, and he actually grabs his bread and peanut butter and pretends to eat it. But instead of my son getting angry at him, he finds it hilarious. He thinks it's great. Now, the second way that our relationship progressed was because of my name, Blecher. I was in the common room again, and somebody said my name, and he says in German, he says, aber das ist auch mein Name. And I don't understand that because his name is something else. I can't pronounce the name even, but he says Blecher is his name. And he explains that his name is Blecher, B-L-E-C-H-A, and my name is Blecher, B-L-E-C-H-E-R. They're different names. His name means flea, and he's trying to show me what that is, what a flea is, like that. And Tinsmith is my name, Blechschmied. And so he's trying to show me that too. And I've finally sort of figure out. So we have a connection, almost having the same name. So as time goes on, he also says to me, he says, "Sind Sie Jude?" And are you Jewish? And I say yes. And he looks sort of troubled, but he doesn't say anything more about it than that. So as I say, I know he's a writer, but I've never read, I don't know his work, and he doesn't have any of his books with him. He says that he's made a movie. They made a movie of one of his books, and it's very famous all over the world. But I never catch the name. So I don't really believe him. I think he's kind of bragging, a little bit like Giuseppe. But what I could see is that he's lonely. He's nervous. He doesn't sit still. He's making notes in a little notebook all the time. But what he's thinking, I don't really know. So my wife and I invite him over a few times, and I get a little bit of information. He says he has a wife named Pipsy. They don't have children. He likes cats. Very superficial information, because really what he likes to do is play with my son. So there's a blanket on the floor, and they play on the floor together. Now, one Sunday morning, he comes up to me. It's a little bit later now. It's April, and the days are getting a little bit longer. And he comes up to me. I'm having a coffee in the common room, and he's looking at something very intently. He's got the Finnish newspaper, Helsingin Sanomat, and he's looking at something very carefully here. And he shows it to me like this. And he says in English, I didn't know that he had any English at all. He says, Jiri. So I'm Jiri at this point. Jiri, what is the difference between sex show and striptease? And I'm very surprised. By the way, I'm Jiri and he is Buhu, because my son's name, his nickname is Booty for Buddha. And so he gave him the nickname Buhu, which means crying in English. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Anyway, so I'm Jiri, he's Buhu. And it occurs to me that maybe he's never seen a striptease or a sex show. So I try to demonstrate the difference, that a striptease, taking off your clothes, and a sex show is absolute, I try to demonstrate. And he gets a light goes on in his eyes, and he raises his finger like this. He runs upstairs, gets a piece of paper, writes down some paragraphs, and then he in Czech, and then he tries to translate them into German. So you have them in Czech, And I will read them in English, but this is the passage that he read to me. The older brokers would laugh and make jokes and treat the undressing of a woman as a collective game of strip poker, removing her clothes little by little, right on the table, while they sipped their drinks from their crystal champagne glasses and savored the bouquet. The girl would then lie back on the table, and the old brokers would gather around her with their glasses and plates of caviar and lettuce and sliced Hungarian salami, and they put on their spectacles and study every fold and curve of her beautiful female body, and then, as if they were at a fashion show or life study class in some academy of art, they'd ask the girl to sit or stand up or kneel or let her legs dangle from the table and swing back and forth as if she were washing them in a stream. Now, you may recognize that passage. I was really impressed. It was so specific. That Hungarian salami was great. And it was so sad and so sweet at the same time. And I watched him. He was watching me all the time for my reactions. And I could see how enthusiastic he was about the picture that he was creating. And that was the first time I saw that this is a real writer, and I respected him. So when he finishes, he asks, is this strip show, or is this sex show or striptease? So I say, well, it's kind of both. Would you like to go? Because he's got the magazine there. And he looks a little worried, and then he says, you like? And I said, well, I haven't been to a strip show since I was a teenager, really. But yeah, it could be interesting. So let's go. So he thinks for a while and thinks it over, and he accepts the invitation. So a few weeks later, the big day comes. Now the days are getting longer. And the twilights, I don't know if you've been in Scandinavia, but the twilights are very long. And there's a kind of pink lavender color. And then maybe around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, it kind of turns a dark navy blue for a couple of hours. But these twilights are very long. So Helsinki is not exactly a sin city or not a very lively place. There were two striptease shows, one on either end of the town. And they had only one performance a day, each one. And the first one was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a very strange time for a striptease show, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we decided to go there. And it's in a kind of a fancy neighborhood called Tulle. We take the tram, number 14 tram, and he's dressed up in a jacket and a checked shirt and shiny shoes, and he seems nervous, but I'm not quite sure why. Anyway, when we get there, the theater is closed, and it looks like it hasn't been open for months. And why they're advertising, I have no idea. But both of us are annoyed and worried that we won't get to the other strip show. Now, the other striptease show is at 5:30 in the afternoon. And the taxis in Helsinki are very expensive, and I don't know how to get there by bus or tram, so we walk. Now, he's 66 years old, and his feet are not so great, but he's very determined. He's going to get to this striptease if it kills him. And along the way, he actually, for the first time, he opens up a little bit, and he starts talking about New York, especially the White Horse Tavern and Dylan Thomas, who went there, and finally, he includes me, and I can share things with him. I can share that I've seen jazz musicians, whom he has heard of. I saw Ginsberg and Orlovsky read, and Jack Kerouac even went to my high school for a year. And he's looking very thoughtful, and I get the sense of what it must have been like, or what it was like for somebody living in the Soviet Union, because this sense of being trapped, because he obviously saw these Americans as heroes, but he couldn't go there. He wanted to be there, but he couldn't go there. So I understood a little bit about him. Now we get to the show just before it starts at 5:30. There are about 3 people in the audience, and the stage has a lot of furniture, and the furniture is all covered up with sheets. I don't know why. Maybe they were going to have a show later, some other show, but it's very strange because it's like you're in a storage room that hasn't been opened for a long, long time. A screen comes down in front of us, and they start showing a film. And this is true, absolutely. They start showing a Charlie Chaplin film. And the Charlie Chaplin film is not like any other Charlie Chaplin film that I've seen, or I think that Boohoo has seen. What happens in this Charlie Chaplin film is that he's having a tryst, a love affair with a married woman, and her husband, who's one of these big guys with mustachios, comes home, and she dresses him quickly in a French maid's outfit. And for some reason or another, the husband accepts this, and in fact, he makes a pass at Charlie as the French maid. And the son comes home, and this is the new French maid, and he also makes a pass at Charlie. And then the daughter comes home with her fiancé, and the fiancé makes a pass at Charlie. And this is very funny scene of Charlie in his French maid's outfit sitting with the women, and he's patting the hands of all these women because of their disloyal men, their unfaithful men. And it really was a kind of early porno film in a strange way. But it was not. So nobody in the audience is making a sound, except there is one sound. There's a fart. But it's not a comic fart. It's like hope expiring. We look at each other, and you can see this is not what we came for at all. This is not what we expected. The lights come on again. The furniture is still covered with sheets, and there's also a table with a stuffed eagle and a big clock on it. I don't know the symbolism of that, but it's sort of like time passing in a depressing place. And a girl comes out, and this girl looks like she's walked through the wrong door. She's in her 20s. She's wearing jeans, sneakers, a blouse. It's kind of skinny, and she looks like she could work in the ticket booth. She looks also sort of numb. She doesn't notice the people in the audience at all, and of course maybe she was just afraid. And behind her, this jazz comes up, but it's the kind of jazz, Dixieland jazz, that you would have for cartoons, which is not the kind of jazz that you would, not the kind of music for a striptease at all. We should have some cartoon jazz now. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay. That's enough of that missing. Okay. So that's what she was attempting to dance to. Now she starts swaying, and she's kind of looking off in the wings for help, but nobody's helping her. She looks very alone, and I look at Boohoo, and he's looking at very intently because this is his first striptease. So he's waiting to see what she's going to do. And I'm feeling very sorry for her. So she takes off her clothes, more or less as if she's getting ready for bed. And she even folds the clothes and puts them neatly in front of the eagle. It's very painful because she's not sexy. She doesn't know what a striptease is. She doesn't know what performing is. And we are feeling terrible because you really feel like you're her oppressor rather than anything else. It was terrible. So she strips down to her bra and her panties and then stops, and the music stops, thank goodness. And I look over at Bohu, and I think he actually has tears in his eyes because we're feeling so sorry to be there and about this girl. And then she collects her clothes, and she kind of goes out in front of the audience and she curtsies the way you do in Scandinavia. Women, and that's the first time that she looks like a normal person. But she goes off the stage, and the screen comes down again. And they're going to show another movie. And it starts, but we take our things and we leave because we've had enough. Go outside. It's about 8 o'clock at night. And it's this very, as I said, this very kind of lavender pink twilight. And it makes his face look very rosy-cheeked and young. But instead of talking about the striptease, he starts talking about booty, about my son. And he says, in German, and trying to understand him, he says, I really like the way you bring up your kids. Because you have this very relaxed way of bringing up your kids, and it's different in Czechoslovakia. It's more strict, and maybe if we could bring up kids like that, we would have had kids too. And so I was very touched by that, because for one thing, he's been observing, he's been taking in everything he could take in about the West, about us and the West, and just observing. But also, it's I find it very funny, because here are these two men who set out to go to a striptease, and they, instead of the striptease, they end up comparing the way you bring up children in Czechoslovakia and in the USA. So we're walking along a little bit, and I say, okay, let's go and get something to drink and eat. And he, again, looks kind of nervous or, troubled. And then I understand why. And I say to him, no, it's okay. It's my treat. I'll pay for it. I'm inviting you. So we go into this striptease. We go into this this bar, and it's a typical Finnish bar, which is kind of wood paneling and a kind of yellow light and sort of moldy smell. And we get something to eat, and we have a few beers, and then we have a few more beers, and a few more beers. And I can see that he's feeling more and more comfortable. This is somebody whose body is accustomed to drinking, and he's relaxed now after the few beers. And the bar starts filling up with people who are actually in good spirits because it's the spring. And Scandinavian people are always happy when the spring comes. Now, you may not know that the tango is very popular in Finland. And so some people play the jukebox and they play tango music, and they start dancing. Now, at this point, I'm not a very good dancer, but I'm drunk, and so I want to dance with somebody. And so I get up, and I look around for somebody to dance. And then, Bohu, I say, oh, we should dance. And he points over there. It's the striptease girl, whom I didn't notice. And she's sitting there with her girlfriend, and they're having a Coke. And so I said, dude, you won't dance with her. And he says, no, I won't dance. So you go ahead and dance. So I walk over to her, and I sort of announce myself, and I say in Swedish, because I don't speak Finnish, but I say in Swedish, which is the second language there, I say, would you like to dance? Kan jag bjuda på att ni dansar med mig? And she says, no. She's very shy. And so then I point to him and I say, would you like to have a drink? Come over to our table and have a drink with us. And they say, no. So I'm about to give up when he gets up and he claps his hands like this. And then he gets up, very strong looking, a little drunk. And then he goes over to her, to the girls, and he shakes hands with both of them. And then he starts doing this most extraordinary thing. He starts doing a dance. Now, this dance I've never seen before. I can't really do this dance, but I'm going to try to show you a little bit of the dance. So, can we... That's enough. Okay, you get the idea. Now, he's much better than I. But what happens is that some men get up and they start dancing with him. Because and it's definitely broken the ice. We're now friends, everybody at this bar. Now, we spend more time at the bar. And in fact, I did dance with the striptease girl, a tango a little bit. But I never told her that I had seen her in the audience, that I was in the audience, and she never said that she recognized me. Now, I think she did, but it felt right that neither of us said anything about it. It felt right. So, anyway, the next morning, I go down to the common room, and Bohu is there, and he thanks me. He says, now I know what is. Now I saw the striptease. And he shows me something else. He shows me a poem that he's written when he got home that night in German about our experience. This piece of paper. I'll read it a little bit in German. You'll have it in Czech. So this is called Blecher und Blecher. Blecher und Blecher gingen aus, Mädel zu treffen. Ein Floh und ein Blechschmied, weit weg von zu Haus. Sie durchleifen die ganze Stadt in der lavendelfinnen Nacht, suchen eine lausige Bar, ein Bier mit Schaum und einen schnellen Blick auf hübsche Müpse. Or you have it in Czech. I'll read it in English. It says, Blecher und Blecher went out to meet the girls, a flea and a tinsmith far away from home. They walked all over town in the lavender-finished night, looking for a cozy bar, a head of foam, and a peek at some pretty boobs. It didn't go so well. All they found was Charlie Chaplin dressed up in a skirt and a skinny girl who'd rather be home doing the laundry. But that was all right. They found each other, that Blecher und Blecher, and a fairly cozy bar, and a small head of foam, and they danced the Verbunk, and toasted the generations to come, and walked all the way home in the lavender-finished night, which is true, which we did afterwards. We walked home. And then he looked more serious, and he told me a story about when he was a stagehand in Prague, working as a stagehand in the early 50s. And they had to gut a synagogue because the theater needed more space for their sets. And he and a friend took the wooden crown from the altar of this synagogue, and he put it in his living room, and they took some of the rest of the altar, and used the wood for firewood that winter. And he said that he didn't feel good about it, but when he sat under that crown, it made him feel like a writer, and it made him feel it made him feel taller. Now, the reason I can tell this story is because in one of his books, he tells the same story, which you may or may not have read. Anyway, this is the first time that he asks about my writing. He says, "What have you written? What writers do you like? What is it like to be a Jewish writer in the U.S.?" And I tell him that I've only written a few stories that I'm proud of, and I'm afraid that I'm afraid that I'm not going to do what I really want to do, which is to stop my teaching job. I was a professor, and really devote my full time to writing. And he says, surprising, he says, "I was the same way. Pipsy, my wife, had to push me to do it." And it really looked as if he was describing something painful. The very next day, we get a call from the U.S., and my father is ill. He had a lung tumor, and he had to have an operation. And so within a week, I packed up the whole family and went back to New York. And I never got to show him my writing. But he didn't really ask for it, did he? Now, it took me a long time, and a lot of changes had to happen in my life, but I finally did do what I wanted to do. I did as he did. I quit my job and finally became a full-time writer. And it feels to me like telling you this story in his home country is like finally showing him my work. Thank you. That's it.